names later on.
I got you.
But you can deal with them.
Now that's one too. That is one, Alabama.
Just watch me.
Okay.
Just look at me.
Okay.
Don't move your chair. Just try to stay.
Okay. Okay.
Perfectly still.
Okay. Watch you on the camera or in person? Watch you directly or on the camera?
Just, just talk to me.
Okay.
The camera catch you.
Okay.
The camera got you. Don't look. Just
Okay.
look at me when you talk.
Okay.
Like, I'm going to look at the camera and I'm going to turn around and look at
Two.
you.
Okay. Okay.
Look at me when you talk.
Okay.
Catch you. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is stages or phases of African American music. Indeed, it's information dealing with the African American musical experience from Africa through the continents. And of course, we have with us to talk about the various stages or phases of the African American musical experience, Minister Gregory Taylor. And of course, Mr. Taylor, you've been with us on a number of occasions, and we've had an opportunity to hear some information in reference to some of your biblical and Christian experiences and et cetera, and the importance of music and et cetera. And so I thought maybe that this would be an excellent opportunity to talk to you about the various stages of the African American experience. That is, how African American music developed from the continent of Africa, and indeed how it spread throughout the world.
Yes. Yes, Dr. Haney, it's great to be back. And I would like to introduce myself. My name is Gregory Taylor from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And we have been discussing the music over the times that I've been here. And I'm a graduate of Selma University.
Very good.
And since I saw you last, I have become a member of the Civilian Conservation Corps Legacy membership. And those men's wishes are to be remembered in song down on the Bicentennial Mall. And so so many things I saw bringing together the music that is just absolutely incredible. But one of the things that we have completed is what I call a pipeline from West Africa. And in this pipeline, one of the sons of Africa have shared with me how the music was sang as they were coming into the transatlantic slave trade, you know. And coming into the transatlantic slave trade, the only thing that lasted, as Dr. Y.T. Walker said, was the rhythm in the music.
And so in a real sense, Mr. Taylor, I think we're saying here that when we look back on the continent of Africa, the Africans who came by way of the Middle Passage brought with them their musical experiences, and speak to that. I mean,
Yes.
What kind of music are we talking about when we deal with the African musical experience on the continent of Africa?
I understand that in Africa, everything, every day is done by music, you know, and that there was war music, you know, they used war music in the area of war. And when the music was, as they sang coming into slavery, it was unknown as to where they were coming from, going to, but they have been taught the memories of these songs in Africa. And there is different, you know, tribes that sing different things. They have different drum beats in Africa than what they have in other parts of America, the African American music. And it is basically those things. But what is most interesting is coming into the transatlantic slave trade and how horrible and difficult that was. But the only thing that lasted again was the rhythm. And when Booker T. Washington came back from Africa to America, he said that the children of Africa in the southern plantations have a note of sorrow in their music that you don't find in other African American music in the country of America. And
no, go on. And
Okay.
this is the great Booker T. Washington,
Yes.
founder of Tuskegee, Alabama. I mean, Institute in Alabama, the
Yes.
school that you probably know well.
Yes.
But go on and
Yes.
speak it.
Okay, and he said that the children in the southern states, we have a note of sorrow in our music. And it's really not understood in a lot of other African American communities in America. And it's one of the reasons for conflict in terms of music. Even here today in the area of music, you have disconnects where if they could bring the music together, it would do so much to help heal the country. One of the radio hosts at WHBB, Randy Williams, he said that if the African American community respected the power in their music, it would do a lot to do away with the violence that is going on today. And in the church that I came up in Alabama, we were taught the old spirituals before we got the scriptures. And this way it would always stay with you and that type of thing.
You learn the scriptures through music, through song, in a real sense.
Yes, we were. This is where Dr. Harvey, Otis Harvey, would say the old songs were born in the hearts of our ancestors in the fields, and they are our anchor in America, and the means by which our ancestry passes from one generation to the next.
And so what we're going to do, Minister Taylor, is to take our first commercial break,
Sure.
and then we'll come back and we'll give you an opportunity to talk about the African music as it will now appear in the New World. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. About it.
Okay.
You know, because I'm gonna be over here, and I hate to be throwing that trash in the audio.
Yeah.
But
I got you. I was wondering about that.
No,
I started to ask you if I was speaking loud enough.
No, you're not speaking. You weren't speaking loud. Speak it up. Speak out to it. Okay, and I'm gonna. Let me set the tone for when to come back.
We passed the.
No, this is 6 minutes, and now we're getting into commercial. And then when I come back, this is 8 minutes.
Okay, now will this be the transatlantic? No, we are in America now.
Yeah, in America.
Okay, slavery.
Slavery,
okay.
Okay.
Slavery in America, okay.
Now I'm going to set the tone in terms of how I want you to speak and the
I got you.
sound.
Okay.
You know.
I got you.
Because it's excellent information, but you seem to be holding it back and whispering to me, and I said, I don't know. But
it's been a long time.
you're doing excellent. You're doing excellent. Because you got information. See, that's all it takes.
Yeah.
You got information.
Yes.
That if you don't have any information, then
That's
it's a real problem.
That's right.
But I know you got information because we had you so many times before, and you're talking about it now. But I want you to sort of raise that level.
Yeah, this is the area which I'm most acquainted with.
Yeah. See, I've got 30 seconds.
Okay.
Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Minister Gregory Taylor, and he's giving us some information in reference to the stages of African American music. That is, African American music from the continent of Africa. And in a real sense, I think, as you've already demonstrated, Minister Taylor, African American music will eventually go all around the world. And so let's pick up from where we left off and give you an opportunity to talk about it at where you wish to start.
Sure. now I can pick up in the area of the Deep South. And in the Deep South, as I had said about Booker T. Washington and the late Dr. Owens Harvey, who said, the old spirituals, this is very important, the old spirituals were born in the hearts of our ancestors in the fields. And in the Caribbean, they even referenced to the fact that they knew when they got out of slavery that they didn't have health care or anything like that, but their medicine was in the music. And that's the same thing here in America. And in the area which I came up in, we were taught to always stay near the church where the old songs are sang, because they are our anchor and they're the means by which our ancestry passed from one generation to the next. And the church was like our musical hospital. The first civil rights movement actually took place in Mississippi in a music studio. It wasn't the one that people think it actually was. And I recall when they rewrote the songs in the 60s and went into the streets and sang them. When they come back, Dr. Haney, they were not the same singers they left as. These are key points, and it's very important in order for us to bring the music back that will help heal the country. And one of the professors at Emory University has said, after studying all the families around the world, he concluded that the healing of the American family will start with the point of the old spirituals. And the maestro here, I heard him say in a chemistry class at Vanderbilt University that there's a composer who wrote that one day music will play a great role in saving the world. I believe that we are in that day today. And I've kept my music pure. I'm probably the purest person in America when it comes to music. And this past Sunday, I actually decided to only go to Sunday school because I don't want to see, for me to make my music pure, to mix it up, that's lose money, you know. And so
when you say that you've kept your music pure,
yes,
it means that you don't mix music that you use in Sunday school,
church,
right, with church worship music or worship music.
Right. No. I don't mix it. And one of the other things that have taken place here, the old songs which are born in the hearts of our ancestors in the fields, that was when the European American owned the field. And now I've connected the old songs to a fourth generation farm, you know, in reference to the fact of mentioning to you that we discovered that have inherited a farm in Alabama. So what you have here, that's the heart of the America. The country is the
farm, the land
and the music.
Yes, that's the land
that
and
was
the
born
music.
out of the land.
Yes.
And one of the other things we have got to go back and do, we have got to look at the side effects of the music from the 60s. And see, like a lot of African Americans have OD'd on the MLK dream and this freedom song, suffering from mental indigestion of the 60s. You can't sing. Well, you can't sing nothing but freedom songs and protest music, you know. And these are things we have got to discuss. And you know, Dr. Haney, I believe today we have got to do more discussing music rather than singing music.
Well, I think that's what we're trying to do here now, Minister. That is to talk about the music that you know and the music that we've used for all kinds of purposes. I think you've indicated that music was used in the civil rights movement.
Yes.
It was a way that we protested.
Yes.
But we also know that music was also an element of entertainment.
Yes.
When
that's right.
we talk about slavery and the African musical tradition during that period, how did Africans express themselves in music on plantations?
Well, one of the excellent examples of that is about 2005. Oprah Winfrey had a gala, and she had all of those singers to come together. Maria Shriver, one of the ABC News persons, and they were all singing what I call the modern entertainment type hymns and spirituals. And you had the young singers there, and they were just amazed because they had never seen this aspect of our heritage before. Everybody was amazed, but one of the key things, and I think Sidney Poitier said this, that it was so spontaneous. You know, you can't control it. And in the spontaneity of the music is what makes it what it is. And what I remember was the singer named, I believe, Alicia Keys. She actually caught the spirit of the music. She said, this is something that we have got to keep going. And see, I understand that, Dr. Haney, and that means that the music is not taught, it is caught. And by me keeping mine pure, I'm able to go back and connect the music. And the only thing that I can show you what I mean here is when when writing was added to money, it never separated, you know.
What do you mean when people started to write songs for money?
No. This is way back there. When writing was first added to money, it never separated, you know. And so I keep in my music pure because I know there's medicine in it. It is needed today to help heal. And Dr. Bradley's music was used in the 60s to diffuse racial tension, you know, across the country. And then that mentioned about President Reagan's funeral music. All of those hymns in President Reagan's funeral music, I grew up on them, every one of them, you know.
As a matter of fact, when you talk about Dr. Bradley, I think you're speaking of one of the great pioneers in reference to African American music, spiritual music, and et cetera. So what we would like for you to do, Minister Taylor, when we come back is for you to devote some time in terms of this great pioneer, because I think that most of the music that we hear today, spiritual music and et cetera, will come primarily out of some of the things that Dr. Bradley did, and the most important thing, I think he lived in Nashville, Tennessee. That's right.
Yes,
and
born in Memphis.
Okay, so we've got about a minute, and then we want you to start talking about some information in reference to that experience, and then when we take our second commercial break. But I think that some of the information that you're giving now is excellent, and I think it's the kind of information that we want to use, but we want to wrap it around an individual that you believe. I know because we've had conversations in reference to Dr. Bradley before. As a matter of fact, I think you gave me a book dealing with Dr. Bradley, and so I know that you've got a lot of information in reference to it. And so when we come back, then we'll talk about Dr. Bradley, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. I missed it on. I didn't know where I was, but when you said a minute, I figured that I would try to run that minute out. And so here we come. Back with this 10-minute part, and so some enthusiasm, whatever in reference to. You understand?
Yes. I got it.
And take command of this thing.
We got it.
This is your information, so I want you to start talking about Dr. Bradley and his information. And
we've
got 10 minutes.
10 minutes? Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay. This is the last 10 minutes.
Yes, the last 10 minutes of the show. You see. And just, and we'll come back. I'll introduce the topic again. And we use Dr. Bradley as an example of what music really is. You can talk about some of his experiences, how you knew him, or how people knew him, and what they said about him, and et cetera, going to England, and all of that kind of information. Got 10 minutes to talk to him about. This is going to be the highlight. I'll make this the biggest part of the discussion itself. This 10 minutes. You've given me some excellent information up until now.
Thank you.
I want you to know that. Yes, sir. God is good. Man.
Yes, He is. Yes, He is. Sure He is.
He is. He has kept us all this time. That means you sitting up. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Minister Gregory Taylor, and he's giving us some information dealing with the stages of the African American musical experience from the continent of Africa throughout the world. And I think, Minister Taylor, we can pick up during this last 10 minutes and give you an opportunity to talk about one of the individuals that can bring in a large number of other names and et cetera
Yes.
that played such an important part in the musical experience. And this is Dr. Bradley.
Yes.
Talk about Dr. Bradley.
I grew up with Dr. Bradley singing in Alabama. One of my friends, who's considered herself to be the #1 fan, said he's an unknown superstar. Sang all over the world, sang in China, Paris, France, and we're getting his CD back into those different countries. His name is in granite on the quarter 3 stars, just about 100 feet away from the Civilian Conservation Corps marble plaque. And what we are doing here, Dr. Haney, we are bringing together the music of Sir J. Robert Bradley to fulfill the wishes of the CCC camp men. And on that stone down there, it said that few men have the opportunity to touch as many thousands as those men did over the years. And also that they say at the end, if they see fit to remember us in song, they will consider that their ward. And I have to mention this gentleman too. His name is Charlie Fletcher in Cleveland, Tennessee. He was a CCC campman since about 96 years old. That's about the age my father would have been. But in reference to Sir J. Robert Bradley, it's all connected. And I have had the opportunity to meet architect Kim Hinton of the Bicentennial Mall. And the meeting was so important, Dr. Haney, that I went to visit his church to see what kind of music they were listening to. And that idea came from me reading about where when Sir Winston Churchill met Franklin Eleanor Roosevelt, he had them to play Onward Christian Soldiers because that was during war. And see, I am a child of World War II. My father was there, you know. And so all of these things were coming together, and the purpose of it is to help protect the country because I have inherited what it means to be safe and sound. And if I can't be safe, I can't be, you know. And but Dr. Bradley, music was used from the East Coast to the West Coast in order to diffuse tension. And his website, I don't know if I could give that out.
Yeah, go give that.
The website is jrobertbradley.com. And his music, the book, we are working on he's due out on a postage stamp any day now. And we are just hoping that this will help create safe communities, create an atmosphere, because our people, I don't think it's racism, I don't think it's bullying. I think it's an emotion from the 60s that have turned into a virus, that this music used to debrief us from that, or help us to shed those emotions of that era. And these are areas where we got to go, and music is the key for doing that. And Dr. Bradley sang for the Queen of England in 1955. It's in his book. I've always been, we were on your show, Dr. Amos Jones and I, talking about his book, and he sang for the Queen of England. And I have received 4 letters from the Queen of England in regards to Dr. Bradley's music, you know. And so it is just absolutely incredible for someone to invest in his music back then. And I, not to overthrow the government or anything, but I listened to God Save the Queen. And the reason for it, it keeps my memory of all the hymns that we sang here in America fresh. And see, a lot of the music is stale today, you know. And this is the way to keep it fresh, is to listen to those different songs. And when I visited Kim Hinton's church, I think it's the Hillsborough United Methodist Church, and I went in there, Dr. Haney, and they were singing, I want Jesus to walk with me. And I said, they are singing more I am than we are, you know? And so it's these type of things that's happening with the music now, and we have got to get back to this to save the country.
You know, one thing about Dr. Bradley, his beginning.
Yes.
Talk about that,
Yes,
because I think
that's right.
that's he, Booker T. Washington,
That's right.
several, many others
That's right.
during that period
That is
were
very
able
true.
to rise to great fame.
That's
but
right.
Talk about
Yes.
his beginning.
Dr. Bradley grew up very poor. For a long time, he didn't have shoes. And there's a story in his book about where they were hungry and they didn't have any food. And he told his mother to forget God or something, and his mother got on him because she had trained him to sing in prenatal. And my mother marked me by the church and the prophet Samuel. But also, Dr. Haney, where I can relate to him, my mother was hungry and pregnant with me. And sometimes I can complain like a hungry, pregnant black woman. Well, in Aretha, it's all there. But the music does so much to help today, the atmosphere. And there needs to be more of Dr. Bradley's music on the radio. If Southern Baptists and National Baptists would sponsor Dr. Bradley's music on the air, I guarantee you it'll do a lot to diffuse the tension. And he wrote someone in England and let them know that he sang at the University of Alabama during the time of the problems between the African Americans and the Caucasians. You know, I was just in the 3rd grade then. But I remember all of those times and things that were going on there. He sang at Stillman College, sang at the University of Alabama, and then there's a gentleman here in Nashville by the name of Charlie Parker. He heard him at Sanford University, and there's a testimony he sent me in order to share with others and how Dr. Bradley talked about that if you love, say you love everybody, you know, and you don't love me, these things like that, the music broke out, you know. And but he has an incredible story. And I told him to, when I came to Nashville in 1978, I visited him in his home.
Okay.
And I told him, I said, I was afraid of you, Dr. Bradley, because you would make the people sing in the choir, and I couldn't. So I didn't go, but I did go to church to listen to him, and he said, oh, that's all right. You know?
So you had an opportunity to meet him face to face and go inside his home?
Yes, he was living in the Capitol Towers, and this is what he shared with me there. He said, never insult a person in speech. And he also said to me how kind the Queen of England was to him while he was there.
That's an extraordinary statement.
Yes.
And really for him to be called
Yes.
To England by the Queen, and she having a desire to hear him, and of course she and her court,
Yes.
I'm sure. That's an extraordinary accomplishment for a person who came. Now he was from Memphis, was he?
Memphis, Tennessee, dirt poor, and also Dr., let me not forget, Dr. I think Melvin Townsend at Sun School Publishing Board. He was responsible for sending him to England to the Trinity School of Music to be educated, and his purpose was to come back to America in order to teach his people how to sing the old songs. And this is what we are trying to continue doing today. And I remember he had several opportunities. The man who was over one of the big radio stations or radio makers on would have taken care of him if he had stayed in England for the rest of his life. But he would let them know he had to go back because of how he was sent there. You know, and by us having kept the music pure, we were not allowed to leave the church and rewrite the songs to go into the streets to sing them. And therefore, that means my memory of his music is pure. And I grew up on a multicultural street. There were Koreans, Choctaw Indians, African Americans. My sisters were going to Africa, Stillman, and I met Africans then. So my whole life has been multicultural. And here recently, I mentioned to you, I discovered that just at September 23rd, that my brother was Caucasian, you know, and that has caused me to realize, you know, that humorously speaking, Dr. Haney, I can be half Oreo, half apple, and have 8 colors, Crayola colors in me, because my father roots are from San
Well, that was a common situation in a real sense throughout these periods.
But when you discover it and you know actually what it is, it
So
helps you to better yourself and well as others, you know.
It gives you a better understanding of everything in a real sense, and that life is really great. But its life is real.
That's right.
And so I think
that's right. It's
but
true.
but during this last minute, Minister
please.
Taylor, let me thank you for bringing about what we consider to be some excellent information dealing with the African American musical experience. And I think one of the most important things that I got out of what we were talking about here today is the ability of the certain kind of music to have a great psychological impact upon people, whether it's through singing or through choirs or whatever, and that music is very, very important. And I want to thank you in a real sense for bringing that information by, and I want to encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you and good morning. By Dr. J. Haney, and then whatever topic you want, and your name and whatever topic generally comes up, okay?
Okay.
So this is going to be African Americans in the cities, and we've got the first 6 minutes of background, that kind of information, and you know, just the same kind of information you've been using primarily.
Okay. 1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Testing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, I'm gonna try to keep my voice high.
I hear you.
Dr. Haynes, did TSU win their homecoming game?
Yeah,
They did?
almost
did.
lost it.
I know.
Yeah, you know.
They did better than my MTSU.
Oh, they lost.
Point.
Oh,
Uh-huh.
it was a good game though.
Yeah.
We played Vanderbilt this weekend.
Yeah, that's what I understand. We're at Vanderbilt Stadium.
Yeah, you play it there. It's their homecoming.
Okay, Doctor, you just about ready.
I'm ready when y'all.
Yeah, I like your sociological information, man. That's a lot of good information.
Oh yeah.
People can just listen to one of these 30 minutes.
That's right.
Man,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
information
You get
I
that.
want.
That's right. Hopefully they'll do
That
it.
was the purpose of doing the
The whole
when I
thing,
first
yeah.
started.
That's right, I
Just
bet.
give them something to listen to, and just
Yeah.
a little bit of it, and write it down and go over it and see. If you go over and over and over this basic information, then you find out that a lot of other information start coming into what you
That's
have.
right.
You got to have something to start with. And so that's what we do. I had some struggles dealing with this. You remember Dr. Banky?
Yes. Oh. Yeah, I remember him.
Yeah.
He didn't want you to do it. Isn't that something? Didn't want to see it as academic.
That's right.
That's crazy. That's the same thing.
Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is African Americans in the cities, and we're fortunate to have with us to talk about the economic, political, and social situations of African Americans in the various cities throughout the United States, Dr. E. Kelly Sanford. And of course, Dr. Sanford, you've been with us on many occasions, and as a matter of fact, that's why we keep inviting you back, because you've got a lot of good sound kind of sociological information that you're able to somehow bring it out of the classroom and put it into a practical kind of setting.
Yes.
In terms of how we might be able to deal with it. And it's very informative and instructive, you see. And so so before we get into African Americans in the cities, let's have you to give us some information in reference to your background, education, experience. You know what we do in reference to that. Do that.
Okay. Well, again, I'm Dr. E. Kelly Sanford, and I really thank you again for being here today. I'm always enjoy it when I come. It's an excellent forum. I did my postdoc degree at State College, Pennsylvania, at Penn State, my doctorate degree at Howard University in Washington, D.C., which on today's topic, I would like to say that one of my specializations there was demography, which is looking at the demographic transition of how people may move from one location to another location. So I think it's very pertinent, as well as looking at issues related to crime and deviance within the larger urban areas of the United States, and how that manifested itself from an earlier period to the present. Prior to that, I worked with the national headquarters of the American Red Cross, where I was the evaluation specialist and doing HIV/AIDS education. We did the rollout of many programs that are still in existence here in America as well as abroad. I did my undergraduate and master's degree at North Carolina Central University in Durham, North Carolina, and other work other places such as the University of Michigan at the Institute for Social Research, and as well as at UNC in Chapel Hill. And another person that was going to be very much related to today's topic, Dr. Gerard Linsky, on the development of human societies, as we move from an agrarian to an urban area.
Very good. And Dr. Sanford, this information has to do with some of the things that we're faced with today. While we might talk about an earlier period in American history, you have already indicated that it starts back here,
yes,
with all of these groups coming together and how they lived and how they worked in the cities and et cetera. So before the end of this first segment, give us some statements in reference to the African American in the cities itself.
Okay. I would like to really be able to contextualize it in thinking in terms of migration. And let's first define it as forced migration from the 1500s to 1860. When you think in terms of people who were forced out of Africa into different places, that we might use the term diaspora. And that would mean throughout the Caribbean and South America, and of course here in North America. People were forced there. Other immigrants came, of course, to this United States, but not forced. They were willing to come to the United States of America. And so we can look at that as far as various waves as the first one, the forced migration, where you had about 360 years of African enslavement throughout the Caribbean and here in America before the Civil War, 1861 to 1865, with Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. And so that was one of the type of backdrops, if you will, and looking at how a group of people ended up in such large numbers of millions, say here in the United States. But forced migration was indeed the first type of demographic transition that took place for people of African descent to be here in such large numbers in America. Primarily, as you may very well know, we always talk about where people came. The first place was in the ports in South Carolina, where millions were brought in at that earlier time of this first wave of the migration.
And so this is the beginning of the African and the New World in a real sense. And I think you call it forced migration.
Yes.
And I think that might be politically correct when you call it forced migration, because you're talking about slavery.
I'm talking about slavery.
The international slave trade.
That's right.
That played a crucial part in terms of bringing a large number of individuals to North America, and especially, and I think you've already indicated all of the places. And so what we're going to do, we're going to take our first commercial break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to give you an opportunity to develop some of the information in reference to Africans in the New World and Africans in the cities. And we'll be back very, very shortly, because I think that what you're dealing with now is just laying the foundation.
Absolutely.
The foundation looks quite solid in terms of the way that you've laid it. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
So then migrate into urban areas.
Okay,
that's what I'm trying to get.
That's
that
second.
That's the second part.
Yeah, well, that's excellent. Yeah, that's
and then that last part.
This lady that wrote, I've read part of the book too, dealing with the migration of black folks from. What was?
I don't know. Carol Stack did one.
Of another son.
Yeah.
It's.
Native something. Not native.
No, it was. Contrasting Africans who worked in the sun and then go to the northern parts of the United States, but the economic situation was not different, so it was of another son or something. It's a very, very popular,
good book.
Yeah, very popular book. You know, that I've read most of it, and I can't even think of the name of the author itself now. But it's all right. Yeah, this is a clip of information that we want you to
Yes,
putting
yes,
it out.
definitely. Yeah, because I want to try to lay out how all these problems in urban areas exist today, but it was stemmed from what happened earlier. That's what people like to say, oh, that was back then, this is now. It's very important to make those connections.
Well, that's why I try to encourage people, people to use this information.
That's right.
Students, all the students have to do is just write down
that's right.
the essence of it, and
you
then
can't get them to do it today. You go crazy in the class. I just left. You leave them. I came left the classroom.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. The topic is Africans in the New World, or African Americans in the cities. And we're fortunate to have with us Dr. E. Kelly Sanford from Tennessee State University. And so, Dr. Sanford, let's pick up where we left off during this next 8 minutes. Okay. It'll give you an opportunity to sort of develop and to push us forward in terms of Africans in the New World and Africans in the cities.
Yes, so in the last segment, you were absolutely right. This forced migration was indeed the worst type of an enslavement that could have possibly happened in the human history of mankind, and that was this peculiar institution of enslavement. And so when we think about those 360 years from 1500 to 1860, then after the Civil War, you had a number of different changes that started to occur in the United States. And around about 1860 to 1870, you found some free African Americans starting to move west. But then what we refer to as the Great Migration started around 1916. And this is very important because people who were freed by this time and became a notion of still the vast majority of the population still living in the South and in agriculture. But there was a human development change that occurred from agriculture to industrialization. And so the boll weevil that ended up hurting the cotton in the South, and so people of African descent started to migrate for better lives, better conditions, to migrate to the North. And so you found that places like Cleveland and surprisingly Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., that is endearingly called Chocolate City, all these other urban areas, or in New York and Harlem, all of these urban areas people moved to try to have better jobs in industrialized type of a country at this time. And as they moved there, they were hoping for a better life. And this is one of the primary reasons for moving from the South to the North. And when they went into these particular areas that became, as time went on, very much a part of urban problems. Economics became disastrous. This groups of people that migrated there came there with high hopes and in many instances prospered and did a lot better, but they had low-skilled types of jobs that they could finish a job and then go right out of that job and take on another one. So things were better. And I would also like to say during this time period of 1916 to say that first migration period to 1930, if we think about World War I and World War II, why there was a need there for people to build railroads because of the war, to build military equipment. So therefore industries evolved and there was a need for large numbers of people to work in those industries. So this workforce that moved there came there for those types of reasons. But on a more intellectual level, it is very interesting to understand because of that great migration, something by the name of the Harlem Renaissance emerged. And during this time period, you had people like Zora Neale Hurston, the great Duke Ellington, Count Basie, just many other literary scholars at that time, the great W.B. Du Bois, and Marcus Garvey, all of those people in this central area from that great migration emerged that really contributed to the American culture as well as the world culture. But now, given that, you had World War I, World War II, large concentrations of people moving from the South to the North, with an increase of millions by this time that have moved into urban areas. And after they got there and worked very hard, you find that discrimination was even there in the North, as they very much experienced sometimes in the South. People were disrespecting, weren't used to that group of people moving in, that group of people taking jobs that others felt that they should have. And when you think about today's political climate, some of the same issues are very much present with immigration of other people coming into the country, or with groups of people still competing for jobs and within the workforce. But this was a great migration that took place in that particular time period from 1916, say, to 1930, with large concentrations of African Americans moving. And then we can look at what we might refer to as a second wave of that same migration that went on from up until the 1960s through the 1970s. Again, with people moving from the South to the North in large population numbers. And that statistics just increased, and people were moving for a better way of life, and to also to prosper and to move away from a very depressed, offensive, racist society
and the violent side at the time.
Yes.
Well, since we're into a voting season now, how did African Americans participate in the politics once they got out of the South? Make some statements.
Well, that's a very interesting concept, because historically, Africans who had an opportunity to vote would have probably voted in the Republican Party at that particular time. But then there was a transition that took place, after World War I, World War II, and things started to change, that people started to move toward a more democratic type of voting. And those types of possibilities, as they move to the North, lean in that direction. And I think that's why today you will find large numbers of people who are concentrated in urban areas will vote on the Democratic ticket, because they feel that their policies will gear toward them more so than what a more conservative Republican Party would. So they actually were indeed the Democratic Party. But they were a force to be reckoned with, and people had to go in, and many people started to merge into education, become Congress people out of those urban areas, and very politically motivated in that urban setting. But going back to that whole notion of them moving there, we would like to try to say that when we look at the culture of those concentrated urban areas, a lot of deviance started to emerge. Why? Because the economics within those particular cities did not allow people to continue, as we moved into a technological age, to have the same jobs that they had when they went there in an earlier time period of 1916 to the 1930s, or why they went there in the 50s and 60s in large proportions. So now we see pockets of cultural poverty within those same urban settings that would be disproportionate of African Americans in that area. So education, economics, school systems, family breakup, all of those characteristics that would lead toward high crime rates are certainly characteristics of a large number of the urban areas. And then this become a very huge problem within the United States. So when we look at Chicago and look at other urban areas, we see homicide rates are so high. It's not that it's the people, but it's the social environment of living in the culture of poverty and those characteristics that it has manifested that will cause that to happen.
Okay, and we're going to take a short commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
In the South, because of the early migration, are now moving back to the South.
And in the meanwhile, say something about the system of separation and segregation.
Oh, yes,
in the South, it was clear.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the law, Plessy versus Ferguson.
That's right.
But in the North, it was not always that way, and how that might have contributed. The separation of only black folks here. And do something
right,
like
I hit that too.
Because I think that was sort of round out.
That's right.
This excellent information. You've got them there.
That's right.
And they're working, and they're going to war and everything else, and et cetera. But while they're there, everything is not equal in a real sense. And this is where the suffrage plays a very, very important part. And some of the things that we ought to be thinking about today.
That's right.
In terms of trying to deal with this politics. Okay, but that's essentially, yeah.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
have 10 minutes. And
Okay,
so
yes,
anything
that's
that you want
fine.
to throw within
Okay.
the framework of making people understand the violence, brutality, and et
Okay.
cetera, in the northern parts of it, sociologically.
Okay,
Yeah, just
absolutely.
throw it at us. You see.
Okay.
I'm trying to know that lady's name.
Yeah,
It starts
I
with
hear
an
you.
N. She did this tremendous study on Africans, the
great
migration of
migration.
black folks to the northern parts of the
Okay,
United States.
so,
Was on
yeah.
all of the. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. E. Kelly Sanford from Tennessee State University, and he's giving us some information in reference to Africans in the cities. And let's pick up where we left off, Dr. Sanford, and have you to talk about some aspects of separation and segregation and some of the other things that you like to deal with during this last 10 minutes of Africans in the cities.
Okay. Well, and as we look back historically and coming out of slavery with the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment, there were rules and regulations and actually laws that were put in place that were legal segregate people in the South. Mm-hmm. And this was very much a part of the 1896 Plessy versus Ferguson that made everything legal to be separated. And we know out of slavery through Jim Crow laws for 81 years, things were separate with unwritten laws that made things segregated here in the South. So when people made that great migration to the northern areas, they really moved to try to have a certain freedom, opportunity, and as we mentioned in the last segment, job opportunities to work in industries. But as they got there and increasing numbers became, we make a distinction in sociology between overt type of racism and segregation, where laws are there to say that, and then covert. And those things that are overt are pretty much legalized. They are there, and you kind of know your position. But when it's covert, it's beneath the surface. It's not so much written in law. But people might still act in very prejudiced, racist, and discriminatory ways. So we can find that was starting to emerge in the northern cities. Although African Americans migrated and went into the urban areas and they were pretty much concentrated in one area, if they would go out to get jobs eventually, they found a lot of discrimination. Or in many instances, they may have been discriminated against going into other areas to have upward mobility and housing. You can see even within this campaign, one of the presidential candidates discriminated against African Americans to live in their apartment complex. And so this type of racism and prejudice was very much a part of the North as well as in the South, but there was this subtle difference that was there. But it was indeed present, and it was discriminatory toward African Americans that treated them in such an inequitable way that it not allowed them to advance within that area as others could and live freely. But it was much better than living in the South. But there were still great problems that were there.
And so, and you often talk about the sociological impact in terms of how Africans lived and some of the struggles that they had to overcome. Talk in reference to some of those things.
Well, that's a peculiar institution going back from slavery all the way. It was horrible. Institutions that are so important were just broken up. People doing that first forced migration, of course, families were destroyed, laws saying that you can't learn, didn't have medical care, housing was awful. You know, if you watch any of the film that are out here today, 12 Years of Slave, which is kind of interesting just to bring that up, a person that had migrated to the North and was just doing his work and then got captured and pulled back into South, and it was a person that was enslaved there, because there were free African Americans even during the earlier time periods before the Great Migration, and some even as early as say 1860 to 1870 went west. They were free African Americans, and some of those same free African Americans went to the north, but many went out west into the California area. But it was kind of an interesting phenomenon to see that they still had to experience this indifferent treatment, but that enslavement was just a horrible thing when you look at things that are going on today, because culture is defined as knowledge, customs, language, values that are passed down from one generation to the next generation. So if you think in terms of 244 years of enslavement, 81 years of Jim Crow laws that led into legal segregation, how could one group fare in an equal way or balanced way in a society that says you're supposed to have education, economic opportunity, but you have forced desegregation and racism that prevents that? And now those born in the 80s and 90s might feel that there's a sense of, oh, everything is just fine now. However, there's some still connections that are going on with what happened from 1619 to the present, within many of the environments and families that are present today. We still have a disproportionate amount of people in very high percentages the first time of graduating from high school and college. You know, first generation still today. Why? Because of the culture here in America and how it was founded. Alex de Tocqueville, for instance, he came here during the time of slavery and was quite surprised. He came here to look at our penal system. And when he came here to look at this prison system that they felt in comparison to the old world was much better, he was quite surprised because he saw people who were enslaved. Enslavement was still present. The old world had slavery going on, but they got out of it. But America was still doing it. And he felt that we would never reach a true democracy because of the very foundations, the pillars of our institutions were based on slavery. So he, in his book, Democracy in America, his central thesis is saying that we will never reach a true democracy because of how it was founded.
How it started.
How it started.
Very good. You know, in terms of trying to move toward that, we've got about 3 minutes.
Okay.
Let's say something in terms of the efforts that were made by Africans to improve themselves. You know, NAACP, the Urban League, and etc. It didn't go. They didn't go so very far, but at least it helped to stem some of the tides in reference to this discrimination. Speak to some of those.
Well, the great Dr. W.B. Du Bois and others founded the NAACP, and this was the great Niagara movement, where they founded there. A lot of other European Americans were very much in support of it to try to bring about justice for people of African descent that had been discriminated against. With that whole Harlem Renaissance and people with the Great Migration moving to the north became educated, and they tried to organize themselves into organizations to go back and to try to change the laws. And this is very prevalent even during the time of the Civil Rights Movement. All of the Urban League came into urban areas to try to bring about equality for people who would live there and were being discriminated against, to try to bring equal opportunities for people. And I know time is running out, but what is interesting now when we have this topic of migration, that the current trend is what we call in-migration. We're finding people who historically migrated to the north, and now generations out who had never lived in the south are now coming back to southern states. So we see places throughout the south where we have an increasing population of African Americans who are educated. They're either retiring or making their homes here in the south, and we're seeing that type of migration.
And this whole issue of gentrification, speak to that.
Yes. Oh yeah, gentrification is a horrible thing, because in traditional places that were segregated, you're finding a large number of people going back in there, European Americans, buying homes from people. That's causing the taxes to increase. And as a result of that, they are pushing people out of those particular areas. We can look right here in our town here, and it's happening here all around. In urban areas it's occurring. It's occurring throughout the United States. I recently visited Washington, D.C., and places where people at one time did not want to live on DuPont Circle. Now they have come back in and renovated and pushed people out, and other things that were going on there. So that's a horrible problem that we're having. It's the whole notion of people moving in, buying cheap, fixing up, then the increase in the value of the houses are going up.
And the
they
people
put-
who stayed in those homes, and somebody said that this is one of the real problems,
Yes.
in terms of the homeless population,
Yes.
that a large number of folks are being pushed out of these
Absolutely.
areas with no other places to go, and et cetera.
That's
And I tell you what we're going to have to do, Dr. Sanford, we're going to get ready for the end of this show, but I think that this is a topic, which
Yes.
is to say that, dealing with your experience and some of the
Yes.
things that you've dealt with, to talk about the homeless population
Yes.
in a real sense and to give us some information in reference.
Okay.
And so what I'm doing now is making a mental note
Okay.
in terms of dealing with this as an issue, because I think this gentrification and
Yes.
some of the other things that we've tied together in reference to that will play a very, very significant role dealing with Africans in the cities, you see.
Absolutely.
And so we've got about 30 seconds, and I just wanted to
I look forward to
alert
that.
you to that, because I think
Absolutely.
that that's the kind of information, sociological kind of information, that our people would like to know in terms of what we're doing. And so let me thank you, and let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.